if everybody knows VNG, right? Does anybody not know VNG? You don't know VNG, so let me introduce VNG a little bit. Just two stats that I found on the internet, just for fun. So, it keeps coming back. It's okay, right? So, when VNG started out in 2004, Vietnam only had about 10 million internet users. And today we have about maybe 32 million internet users, right? And in 2006, VNG's revenue was about 17 million USD, is that right? And today you're at 90 million, which is, even 17 million is unbelievable for a startup in Vietnam in technology. So my first question for you is, where does that revenue come from?
Gaming, you know, right?
Which game? Today.
Today would be a number of games. So back in 2006, then I would say 90% of revenue coming from one game, which is Volunteer, which is the blockbusters. Today, the number one game is around 20% of gaming revenue.
Which game? Volunteer.
I cannot tell you. It's definitely not Volunteer.
It's not Volunteer.
No.
Okay. Why can't you tell me?
It's called undisclosed information.
Undisclosed information.
Yes.
So what is your view on games? Yesterday I met with a friend and he said that he makes games. And all of his younger brothers don't go to school because all they do is play games. And actually the games that he created.
Yeah.
And all of his parents, both of his parents always yell at him, "You make the games that ruin our sons." So, what is your view on games? And I know that in 2010, 2011, the Vietnamese government was also there are some issues with games and how does it impact society. What's your view on that? I know that you play games as well, still, right?
A lot.
A lot.
Yes.
What's your favorite game now?
Playing versus Zombie 2, I'm playing last night until 2 o'clock.
Okay, so what about impact of games on society?
I mean, if you intend to ask me whether a game is a bad thing, my answer would be no. Obviously, I think that all the people in this room would understand that technology, or like anything else in the world, is not inherently bad or good. It's how people use it and how the reaction of people will make something good or bad, right? From a business perspective, and obviously gaming is a huge industry. I have been saying this for so many years, but basically, I think our generation spends more time and money on gaming than any other form of entertainment, including movies and music and whatever it is. I mean, so that's a business view. And obviously, as a business and as a guy, I would also think about how gaming affect, have negative effect, and obviously it does have negative effect on people. Maybe not everybody is addicted, but there's definitely a story of people who play games and not being a good son or boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife. I have a good friend who complained to me that his wife wakes up every 3 hours to play Heyday on iPhone. If you play Heyday, there's a feature of the boy that you have to spend a lot of money to hire him, and he returns every 3 hours. So she basically set up her iPhone to wake her up every 3 hours just to assign tasks to the boy, and that's why her husband crazy. So that does have certain negative impact on people, but I think that's just like everything else, in life, right? You cannot have good side without bad side, and how society or individual dealing with this is going to be how the whole industry are going to evolve. And honestly, I would have to say that gaming in Vietnam industry have not evolving in a positive way. And that I would say mostly because how the society and the regulation not being able to deal with the impact in a positive way also. So that's why the development of the industry has not been very good in the past few years.
So not as fast as before, you think?
Growth is something that obviously a lot of people would think of, but if you look at the industry, then not just growth is something that people care. So for example, a lot of people, I mean, how many people in this room doing a gaming startup? 0? 1. See, in the industry is the largest in terms of revenue in Vietnam, and they have one of you here doing game startups. It's not something not right. And that's just one example of, I think that the industry has the potential to develop a lot more healthy as a whole. I mean, business, government, society learn how to deal with the impact. But we failed to do so. I mean, obviously, also as an industry leader, we also failed to shape how everybody is going to react to the impact of the industry. So as a result, we do not have a healthy industry.
But how should it be?
I mean,
how should it be different from what it is now?
One of the things you're looking at as Korea is an example, right? I mean, they pioneer the gaming industry. There's a lot of people, and there's a lot of negative impact of gaming in Korea as well. But as a whole, from a government regulation, from the industry players' perspective, how the company work together, they will be able to create a very strong gaming industry. Right now, they're number 1 in the world in terms of online gaming. So that's one kind of example, right? I cannot tell you how a healthy gaming industry in Vietnam would be, because I simply don't know. But I think that we can see where we are today, and we know that definitely we are not in a good place. And we can see example of very, very good place.
So with games, does VNG have dreams of being like Rovio, like producing Angry Birds, something that would go worldwide? Everybody has it on their mobile. We see commercials on it everywhere. Is there that kind of dream?
I think it doesn't need to be in VNG to have that dream. Any guy who making game having the same dream, or anyone playing game having that dream also, right? It doesn't need to be us to have that dream. And obviously, we have a lot of people who play and make game in the company. We surely have that. We do. But I think everybody in this room, doesn't matter who you are, you still have a dream of someday you're going to do something amazing and big. So I don't think that's a good question.
I wish. Well, okay, with gaming as kind of the main moneymaker of the company, and so why are you guys investing so much time into all this other stuff? Zalo, Zingme, Zing Video, which died, Download, all this stuff. Why are you putting all this effort into all these things that are not necessarily making money?
Okay. I think two things, right? I would say it would be, I think one thing is coming from how we think ourselves as a company, and the other coming from how we want to be in the future. How we think ourselves as a company is going to be back in around 2006, late 2006. That's when we have $17 million US, as we mentioned. So we have a gathering of about 50 people in the company, and we ask ourselves what we want to be. And the obvious answer in that room is we want to be more than a game company. And the reason is we see that gaming is just an example of how the internet and technology impact Vietnam. So we launched our first game in June 2006, and 3 months later, we are on the #1 newspaper in Vietnam, right? In a bad way, not in a good way. But that obviously, anyway, not many companies launch in the US, and 3 months later is on the New York Times, even in a negative way. But we look at that as how things change dramatically because of the action that we do. And obviously by the action of many other people as well, not only us. And we believe at that point, 2006, that internet and technology will have a tremendous impact on Vietnam on years to come. And we don't want simply just be a game company that making money. Well, it's a good thing, but we just don't want to be that. So we say, you know what, we grow up with computer, we grow up with internet, we really like that. So let's try to do many other things. So like, you know, we have 50 guys and, you know, everybody come up with different ideas. I still remember some of the ideas like, let's do a dating website, let's do a, like, you know, online education. Anyway, people come up with so many ideas. But the foundation of that meeting is we decided in the future that we don't want to be a game company. We want to be an internet and technology company from that meeting. And that explains why in 2007 we launched Zing. So that how we see ourselves. Secondly, we talk like how we want to see ourselves in the future. I know how we want to grow in the future. If you're looking at the game business, and if you're just looking at it from a business perspective, then okay, you know, business model is you just buy a game and you localize it, like, you know, and you just publish and making some money, right? But then, if you look deeper, then actually it's about it's a content business, and in content business, then you have essentially two layers. One layer is basically a content developer. So you make games, music, you write books, so on and so forth. And one content is the people who distribute those content to many people. And in order to distribute it, we have to build what we call platforms, which is a very, very popular kind of like concept which a lot of internet and technology companies. So the idea is you are not actually doing a specific thing, like selling game or selling music or selling book. What you do is you try to create a platform of users that you keep the user as close and as tight as possible, and then you can monetize the user base by selling them games, selling them music, selling them iPhone in place of Apple, and many other things. So I think the essential concept of a business is we see in the future we want to make money by building platform of users, not just buying games and simply selling them. And so that is basically the concept, and that's why we trying to do so many things, right? So we launch things, we trying to use social product, we trying to do many others like non-revenue generation product, but the whole idea is to create a user base that as sticky as possible, and through which we can do many things.
So with Zing, so I got a ton of questions from online about Zing. People want to know. And with Zing, you say you want to monetize. So, and I heard that you also wanted to do virtual items on Zing, but that never came about. What happened with that? And now Zing is all over the press. It's like, oh, Zing lost to Facebook, blah blah blah. And so, why?
So what question do you want to ask?
First question first, second question second.
Okay.
I hope they're good questions.
If you're looking at the internet, and essentially, for internet company, there's three ways to monetize. So we talk about so the first one is okay. So the first step is you build a product or you build that have users, right? And then you learn you have to have a business model to monetize the users, have money to survive, to grow, to invest. So there's on business model, there's essentially three of them. One is user pay, one is revenue, and one is commerce. So that basically three essential ways to monetize those people. And user pay basically is gaming or gaming related kind of application or features. And in Asia, actually, because of culture and also social demographic, that gaming is a very big part of monetizing an internet audience. If you look across all of the major internet market in Asia, and gaming is a huge way of monetizing. You look at Korea, you look at China, you're looking at, obviously Vietnam and other Southeast Asia. Online advertising, online ad is also a major way of monetizing, but the percentage is smaller than game. And also for many Asian countries, online ad is still a small pie in terms of revenue size. And obviously commerce then is dependent on the market. So back to us, obviously we have many attempts and experiments to learn to experiment with business model. So we have like avatar selling, we have like concept like subscription, and so on and so forth. And like you say, many of them have not been successful. And obviously there's two very generic explanations. Number one is we haven't learned how to crack the user habit to convert them to pay for something yet. Or number two, actually the user's not going to pay for those things, right? So take a recent example of, in the mobile messaging like Line or on Kakao, there's a huge way to monetize by selling stickers, selling those avatars that people can buy. And if you think about it, that actually is a very game-like feature because people are going to buy cute avatar or buy things that to relate to their emotion or their ego, and that's a very game kind of like mechanic. That's actually you use the word called gamification, right? So we have right now we're having a debate internally to see how much of that going to work for the Vietnam market, right? Because maybe it doesn't work because of people in Vietnam doesn't like. We don't know. So what happened is we keep trying many different ways to monetize, and so far what we learned is gaming still works the best. We haven't learned any other way in terms of how to make user pay.
So that's why there's no stickers in Zalo yet?
That's not the answer. I mean, there's no sticker because we simply don't have resources to do it yet. That's the honest answer. But then we also discuss a little bit about it, of how users are gonna kind of like embrace it. But looking at how people use Line or Kakao here, I don't think that people pay a lot for the stickers in those apps in Vietnam.
Or virtual things.
Yeah, so maybe someone else is going to figure it out, I don't know. So that answers your question about monetization, right? On Zing, I think particularly people talk about Zing Me versus Facebook, right? So not Zing as a whole. And honestly, I wrote a short blog on my Zing blog about a year ago. And basically, we knew from the start, the very start, that we would not, that the chance of us winning over Facebook is very, very small. And it's very obvious, right? That's a global brand, global product, very sophisticated in terms of product, kind of like, and technology development. But we decided to just, to do it for a few reasons. Number one, like many of you here doing startup, even your chance is very small, but if you have a chance, why not give it a try, right? That's an obvious kind of like way of thinking. The second is, we also believe that we're going to grow our capability a lot doing that part. In terms of product design, in terms of technology, in terms of learning about operation and many other things. So that's reason number two. And what happened is, right now we definitely far behind Facebook in terms of user interaction. The amount of user interaction on Facebook is tremendous. In terms of user, we still have about 50% of user reach compared to Facebook. But in terms of user interaction, I think that we have less than 10%. So that's some statistic. So it's okay. But what happened is we grow our product and technical capability tremendously of the whole, 3 years doing Zing Me.
So then do you guys feel that you lost? Is that the mentality? Because you move a lot of people from Zingme to Zalo now, right? And you kind of use the experience from Zingme into Zalo.
If you use the word in terms of like, if the goal is to be the #1 social network, then yeah, right? I mean, like we lose outright, right? I mean, like, you know, if everyone can see from the numbers that there's no way to hide it, then yes, the answer is yes. But I think in terms of business, then it's having the mentality of like you trying to go after opportunity, and then if the thing doesn't work out, then you have to figure out what's the next thing that you're going to do that makes sense from an organization or from a personal perspective, and you just keep moving. So we never really think much about losing, really.
And I don't know, is anybody here doing social media for startup?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Somebody online asked, what advice would you give for someone trying to build a social network, social media in Vietnam?
I think social media is a very big word, right? Because I think right now media inherently is social, because media doesn't really have any value if nobody's talking about it or if you don't really share it. So if you talk specifically about like if someone trying to do a social network, then my advice is think really hard before you try, because and the reason is this: social network is for the mass is a winner take all kind of like battle. So that's why you see in the world all the big guys really spend a lot of resource and effort on it. And then in Vietnam, obviously, we only have hope if we can find a niche that's small enough that we can like win there and see some attempt to do like social network for doctors and social network for, I don't know, I mean like programmers and so on and so forth, so some niche. And I don't know enough about the concept of doing social network for a very small group of people, but the way we feel is that Vietnam market is not big enough to have a meaningful niche social network. That's our view. We might be wrong, I don't know. But in terms of social media, I think that there's a lot of opportunities if you define, and it's not just about trying to build a social network. You can be a social media agency, for example, or you can build tools or people to be able to understand and manage the aspect of their business that relate to social media. So I think that the field, I think in Vietnam is underdeveloped, and there's a lot of opportunity that we simply not study or paying enough attention to.
Kind of moving into Zalo now then. So I heard I heard recently that Zalo is now 4 million users, and I also heard that KakaoTalk is kind of leaving. I also heard that Viber is kind of coming more, and Viber is, I don't know, 6 million or something like that. And Line is, I haven't heard from Line recently. I don't know. So what, besides, I mean, I know that all 3 or 4 of you guys, except for Viber, right, and WhatsApp, have been, putting a lot of money into advertising, mobile.
The question of curiosity, right? Because I'm not so sure what value that brings to the startup, but okay. So coming back to the second part of your question, why did we decide to enter? And again, it's the same thing as why did we decide to do Zingme, right? So social is a big part of the internet. Everybody knows that. But not many companies would be able to do it simply because it would require a lot of resource and investment ability. I mean, just to share you, this is something that we share internally. So when we looking at mobile about 3 years ago, and we feel okay. Obviously, even before WeChat become very popular in China, and we know a company called Xiaomi. Actually, Xiaomi CEO is a legend, who is a good friend of us, because he used to be the ex-CEO of Kingsoft, which is our first partner.
You volunteered from
Yes. And then when we met him, and he talked a lot about Meetup, which is the first really popular mobile messaging from China. And we talked about it, and then about 2.5 years ago, and then obviously half a year later, WeChat became hugely successful in China. And we said, okay, so there's obviously an opportunity in the market. What should we do about it? And then the WeChat team come and talk to us and say, you know what, doing this is really, really difficult in terms of product development. Not many people can do it. So why don't we partner? And you have to operate and promote our product for Vietnam, and you can make money on the platform. And we debate about that a lot internally as well. And we say, okay, you know what, if we do that with WeChat, then obviously we have a very strong chance of being successful. Remember that's 2 years ago. But then after a lot of soul searching and debate, we decided, you know what, let's do it ourselves. And the main reason for doing it ourselves is because we believe platform product, so product like Facebook, product like Zingme, product like WeChat or Zalo, we will never be successful as a front-end company if we do not develop it ourselves, right? And control the development and control all the aspects of product and platform.
So you think WeChat would not have been as successful as Zalo?
We don't know, but we made the decision 2 years ago, and then we spent 1 year developing the product, basically. So why we do it? Because obviously the opportunity is very big. If you're looking at all these success that Line and Kakao have in their respective market, and now they're fighting for global dominance, it's obviously a huge thing. And I think, I personally think Facebook should be very, very worried. And that number one answer is the same later part of your question. Number two is what we've done aside from all the crazy marketing that we have seen. I can simply answer that what we have done is we learned a lot of lessons from Zingme. All the things that we have not done well with Zingme, I think the team has been able to look back and say what we can do better. I just take one example. One of our strategies is to use a lot of celebrity endorsement. But when we did it with Zingme, the celebrity never really used the product. So they just show up at the event, say hello, this is good, and then they just took off. So with Zalo, what we want to change is we want them to really use it, right? So they need to be the user of the product first. And when they become the endorsement of the product, if they use it and they use it regularly, then it will bring a very different message for people compared to if they just simply show up at an event or just simply go to the movie shop or the photo shop. So that's an example of what we have learned, the failure that we went through in Zingme and we applied to Zalo.
And what about, so like you said, Line and KakaoTalk and all of them, they're, like Line dominates Thailand, and they're all attacking each other. So when is Zalo, actually my question is, when is Zalo going to attack, Cambodia or Thailand or Indonesia or South Africa,
I think I would answer this question a little bit differently because I remember on the Facebook page you guys asked why not we go beyond Vietnam, right? And why we just stick with the local market. And obviously a lot of startups having a lot of aspiration for international, global, regional. I think what we think is we need to really understand ourselves deeply before we can go out. And this is, maybe this is a little bit contradicting to the startup spirit of, let's fucking do it. We worry about everything else later, and we just jump in the water. If we don't know how to swim, it's okay. We're gonna manage to survive and just swim, right? And that a good spirit. But we, over the years, we have learned one thing, that success is the combination of luck and ability. And oftentimes, when we just jump into the water and then trying to survive and trying to swim, if we success, it's poor luck. So we're looking at the success that we have with voluntary game back in the early days. It's dumb luck, basically, right? We knew nothing about the game industry. The first game we signed become a blockbuster. This is poor dumb luck, and then with a good luck in terms of product, luck in terms of timing, and many things that put together. But luck cannot bring you so far. I mean, you cannot win lottery 3 times in a row. So if you just rely on your luck to be successful, then that's not going to be a sustainable strategy. You have to rely on your ability to really be able to swim, to survive on a long kind of swim, water, runs, or triathlon, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about international or global or regional, whatever it is, then we have to really understand what is going to be the success factor, what is the requirement of ability, and whether we have it or not. And if we don't, then kind of like jumping out and doing it is just basically based on luck. So US, even now we don't have an English version of Salad because our focus is very, very clear. We want to make sure that we absolutely win the Vietnam market. And right now, if you ask me, we are not so sure yet. Right? So that, that will be the priority of the team until they really be able to answer that question. And if you're looking at Cacao, for example, it's a great product. It's a very strong startup from Korea. How they faring in the international market compared to Line and WeChat? It's not easy.
Not very well.
Not very well, if you can answer that. And they have done this 3 years already. They have the best Korean developer there is. I mean, they're the sexiest startup in Korea. They have all the industry expertise. They have the brand. They have Big Bang being their ambassadors. And it's not easy. So we just being realistic and trying to focus on one objective before thinking the next things.
But if you focus so much on Vietnam, will it be too late, do you think, when you start to go outside?
You will be having, okay, so this is maybe, I'll rephrase this for relevant to startup as well, right? So we have always this dilemma of what is the market opportunity and what is the skill or the resource required in order to capture that opportunity. And you've seen in many cases, a lot of people fail because they never really go after the market opportunity because they don't think that they have enough skills or resources, like we do with international, like I mentioned, right? Whether it's going to be late. So there's many times that people kind of fail because they simply too late. And there's many times people fail because they do not have a assessment of what is the requirement, just simply jump into that business with the thinking of, I have enough skills and resources to be successful. And then you're looking at, maybe it's not startup, but you're looking at a lot of real estate companies in Vietnam, right? Simply thinking of, okay, it's a huge opportunity. Everybody's making huge amount of money, right? And let's go do it, right? And looking at 3 or 4 years later, how many of them really survive? Really be able to come out on top and making money? So it's a very difficult question for business to judge. And obviously with startup, we don't really have a lot to lose. So we just say, you know what, let's go after opportunity. Because you don't really, worry about what is mean by failing. Because failing means, you know what, we're gonna just do the next thing, or we're gonna go back to our full-time job, whatever it takes, right? So for startup, then people most of the time will not think carefully, will not have business plan, will not have budget. We just like jump into the water and jump into the opportunity. But for business like us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance between a startup mentality and a very deep understanding of what is the opportunity and how we're able to capture it. Because the thing is, we're not worried about failing. Like I said, for us, failing means we can move on, we do the next thing, it's okay. But the thing, we worry, if we don't understand the opportunity deeply, then even if we jump into it, we will not be able to be successful. We're able to succeed anyway, it doesn't matter. Right? So I think and this is also the feedback that I give to a lot of startup people that I met over the years. A lot of the time, what startup has done is they have a very excited kind of like emotion or motivation about an opportunity. And that is very good, because without that, nothing else matters. Without the passion, without the craziness, nothing else matters. But what I see people lack is people lack a truly deep understanding about the opportunity that they're talking about. And what I mean deep understanding is really make yourself become the expert in that subject matter, in that field, right? So, and this is something that internally we also pushing ourselves a lot as well, because it's obviously it's very easy said and done. But what we kind of like tend to fall into is we tend to having some generic kind of like knowledge, because we read blogs, because we read tech in Asia, because we read TechCrunch and a bunch of other things what people say, and then we think that we know enough about those opportunities, right? Everyone thinks, oh, mobile is very big now, mobile gaming huge, right? Let's go and do it, right? Payment is something sexy, right? E-commerce is, and everybody can have opinion about why Lazada successful, why Lazada successful. Everybody can have opinion about everything. But whether that is true, deep knowledge is something that you have to answer to yourself. And something that we ourselves also kick ourselves a lot in the ass, because we haven't done enough homework. So coming back, I think that we're not worrying about late, right? We worry about whether we know what we want to go after, and once we know, then we're going to go after it with everything we got. That's the most important thing.
So speaking of worry, worry about knowledge, what about worry about So recently, they, it's been going around the internet a little bit that maybe OTT will be banned.
Yeah.
So what about worrying about above, what's happening above? And then what are you gonna? Do you think that it's really gonna happen, or what is that all about?
I think we have gone through a lot of banning in our history of cooperation, right? So
you mean the industry or VNG?
VNG, right? So we've been asked to shut down our game 3 times. The first one is after 3 months after we launched voluntary, and a number of times afterward. We've been asked to shut down a number of our products because of certain violations, so on and so forth. So I mean, in the beginning we worry a lot. But now we learn not to worry, okay? For 2 reasons. I think number one, I think in Vietnam, the regulatory framework is very, very difficult to handle. I mean, everybody know, right? You get out to riding motorbike to street, and that's a lot of conditions of like knowing what's wrong and what's right. But then also, I used to use, I take an analogy to say, riding motorbike in Vietnam is a very difficult thing. But if you are careful, it's hard for you to die. I mean, obviously sometimes you're really, really unlucky that someone hits you and you cannot control that. But if you're careful as a rider, then it's very, you're not going to die easy. And the same thing I think happened to business as well. So we learn to be very careful. we don't really comment much about what happened with regulation, but I think that general, I think that Vietnam internet and technology is moving, forward, right? Which means it creates a lot of opportunity for startup. And until that you get to certain size, you don't have to worry so much about regulation. Just focus on getting to that size first. And then once you get to a size where you start to think about regulation, then let's worry about it later. But I think everything's gonna be okay. We don't really think much about the so-called upcoming ban on OTT.
And there's also another one with social media sharing, right?
I think
with news.
I think again, I think that we tend to overreact. If we really again look deep into the wording and look deep into the wording of the regulation, or understand what is the background of the story, then the story is not really as it sounds. But we tend to make things very over-dramatic.
So I have maybe about 5 more questions, and we'll get to everybody else. I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions. So now more into VNG. We'll talk more about VNG. And I'm curious, I don't know if everybody knows so much, but I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about the kind of the challenges and the benefits when IDG kind of brought you and I guess, is it correct that IDG kind of brought you and Brian and 2 other founders together? So how did that play out? How did that work out? And yeah.
Okay, I think the short story is I was trying to raise money from IDG, and at the same time, Brian is starting a gaming startup as well. So we met actually first not through IDG, but through a mutual friend. And then later, also IDG reintroduced us, but then at that time we already knew each other. And that is a very, very fortunate event because shortly after meeting each other, then we kind of decided to merge the 2 companies. So that's basically the short history of VNG at that time.
I don't have a microphone, but because I interview a lot of startups these days, and almost maybe half of the startups I interview, they say, yes, I had a co-founder, but now they're gone. Yeah. Yes, we liked each other, but then we had an argument, and they started another company. And then I interviewed that guy and said, yeah, I didn't like him. I started my own idea, right? Yes. So how do you deal with that? I mean, you probably didn't know Brian that well, right? How did you know that you would, get along? And everybody kind of looks up to VNG and says, oh, it's an all-star founding team, Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, the fact that all the founders of VNG left, but me, so also tell you something about the story you said, right? I think working with other people, not necessarily founders, but basically with other people is inherently a very difficult thing. And why is that? Especially if you're a founder of a startup, because then, number one, you have the kind of idea of what you want to do. So, being a founder, being a leader, being a CEO, you have a vision, an idea, or a way of doing things, and you say, okay, I believe this is the right thing. This is how things should be done, right? And then if you have a team that have 3 people having that kind of mindset, then you start to have problems because then how to which one is going.
Everybody thinks they're right.
Exactly. So I think that, and looking at the history of technology startup, very few stories that the founding team or a number of founders that work well, together for a long time. I mean, Google is one grand example. Often you have failed story compared to successful story. So it comes down to, I think. For me, I think my experience is this. You have to really understand who you are. And then in a founding team, there should be essentially two roles. One is the leader person, the leading person. So it doesn't matter whether you have 2, 3, 4, 5. One person has to be the leader, the one who is responsible. It's not really the one who makes all the decisions, but ultimately your startup can fail or succeed is because of you. And
Someone to blame.
I mean, someone to take the responsibility. And what I mean by if you see yourself as that role, then your role should be, number one, select or convince the other co-founding because you believe they're going to help you to achieve your dream. And once, if you select a wrong person, not necessarily a bad person, but simply the wrong person, then you want yourself to blame. You cannot blame the other guy, right? Because you're the one who select or you invite, right? And once you select or invite those founding people to join you, then it's your responsibility to convince them. If you have an idea, to convince them to contribute themselves and work together with you to achieve the win, right? So basically, if someone said, oh, I couldn't work with that guy because he's so stubborn, or because he's stupid, or because whatever it is, it's more or less because you failed. You failed at whatever stage, whether when you select the guy or when you cannot convince the guy to work with you. So that's the role of the leader. What about the remaining people within the team? Even though we are co-founding, but I think that if you join a startup because you respect the leader, you think, okay, this is a great guy. I believe in him, and I think that if I work with him, then I can achieve my dream or my goal. Short of like you are a co-founder, but you short of a follower, right? So then it's also you need to select that guy as well because you betting your future into him, and it's also your job to work well with him, right? I think it's like kind of like everybody say it's like a marriage relationship, right? So each person has a role. In a family, you should have one person who's the boss. You cannot have two bosses, otherwise the thing will not work. But then the two will have to work together to make sure it's a successful relationship. So I think that think very clearly in any startup situation, whether you are a leader or you are a follower. Right? I think that if there's a startup that everybody think themselves a leader, not going to work. And in a startup that everybody think themselves as a follower, not going to work either. It has to be very clear.
So at OGDC, you said that one of the keys to VNG's success was that you could keep people like long term, and that their experience would kind of contribute to the success. So how do you guys, beyond money, how do you guys keep people in the team? It's not just money, right?
I think if you're looking at statistics, and because I'm not so sure that I say that, but I think that what we try to do is we're looking at the Vietnam situation, and what I mean by situation is number one, we don't have a deep talent pool. Obviously now we have a lot of foreign people coming in, so that's a good thing because now we can tap the world global talent pool. But as a whole, Vietnam is a very limited talent pool. And by talent, where the talent come from? Talent cannot be born, and that's my belief, right? Yes, you can have very smart people, you can have kind of like very dynamic and very passionate, but talent comes from essentially experience, right? Where you learned to do product. If you are just out of university and you never code a product before, you cannot do a good thing. I would say the first Facebook version of Mark Zuckerberg is pretty crap. You talk about technology standard. So, and in Vietnam, we don't have an environment where technology or product talent can be nurtured, right? And I have said that so many times before, but how many of us here really have like 5 years of non-stop experience in technology in terms of like either architect or product development? Like spend the last 5 years with nothing but that, right? Dealing with millions and millions of users and doing a lot of like deep and sophisticated technology problems. Not many of us have that like experience. Same thing with products. Same thing with startup management. So what we don't have that environment. I mean, if you're looking at Silicon Valley, I mean, there's a lot of romantic about Silicon Valley. But the fundamental idea is before Silicon Valley, I mean, like before that, there's big company like Xerox, like HP, like IBM, like Intel, that being the backdrop for all of the talented people and where they come from. Right? If you're looking at all the founders in big business, they have some experience working for big business before. Like Bill Gates used to work for some big business, and same thing with Steve Jobs, right? You're looking at, for example, China. Obviously I went to China a lot, and then a lot of successful startup in China. Coming where they come from? They're coming from Huawei. They're coming from ZTE. They're coming from big and successful technology companies. We don't have that in Vietnam. So what we're trying to do internally is we're trying to tell people that, you know what, trying to work long term so that we're able to build our capability. Because without putting in the time, all the talk doesn't mean anything. Right? So I mean, in OGDC is about game development. I mean, how many of us here that can say that we're making 10 games? Rovio, I mean, I know not Rovio, but yeah, Rovio, Angry Bird company making 90 games before, Angry Bird. How many of us is making even 9 games? Not many people. So, where's the experience that come from? Coming from doing real work, coming from spending a lot of time and sweat and maybe blood as well. Doing it years in, years out. And once you'll be able to say confidently that I have the ability, then that is another matter. But I think things are going to change because, obviously we are now becoming a place where people can have a lot of experience. I mean, maybe other big companies as well, like FPT or DTC or other big companies from a technology startup here. So I think that over the years, then the quality of internet and technology startup in Vietnam will improve because of all of that factor.
This is another question I got online. Do you see VC Core and these other guys as competitors? Especially VC Core, because they're meeting a lot of media.
I think we looking at depend on the area that we do, but I think that because we also not very good at focusing on one or two things. So I think that on many areas, then we have a number of competitors, and obviously VC Talk is one of them. But we're looking at competitors in a slightly different way. And I may share this thought in terms of competing with startups, because maybe I have a biased view, but I'm not sure whether you share my view or not. I think that in Vietnam we tend to look at competitors in a very negative way. Either we think bad of competitors, they're successful because they're doing something tricky or they're doing something bad, or because they kind of I think the mindset is we always looking at competitors and don't respect them, right? I mean, put it very, very simple. We build a culture where we're looking at everybody and we respect them, right? We feel like they are winning because they know something that we don't. They're winning because they're doing something that we don't. And we really have to respect them and try to learn that. Because if we don't, then we can lose. And I think, I think this is, I've seen a lot. I mean, I obviously joined some of these startup forum and also Facebook page. And I think the tendency of a lot of the conversation is not focused on the positive, but focus a lot on the negative, right? And we don't really learn something talking about negative. I mean, obviously we do because we can learn not to repeat the mistake. But if we focus on the positive, we can learn so much more. And I think that people tend to fall into the trap of trying to prove themselves by talking about the negative of other people instead of trying to learn. And I think that we, as individuals or startups or as a community, have so much to learn. Because my God, we are like, so small and insignificant compared to many other people in the world, right? So there's only one thing we can do, which is learn as fast as possible. So for us, we're looking at everybody, we respect everybody. I mean, like, obviously there's certain things that we are not happy about, obviously from a comparative perspective, but we're trying to have a spirit of respect people. And I think that's very, very important and healthy for everyone to be able to develop long term.
And last two questions. Are you going to IPO this year?
No.
When is the IPO? No? What? When?
Don't know.
Don't know. What's the value of VNG though? If you did IPO?
I don't know.
You don't know. And I also heard online that you sold some shares this year. And why did you do that? Did you do that? And who bought the shares?
Okay, I think I buy more share than I'm selling, but I think this is not really a. I can explain a little bit. What happened is we give our shares a lot to our team people. I mean, like I think we want to have more than 200 people really receiving shares in the last 4 years, and we're not a public company. So how people can realize the value of shares, right? So what we did is we buy back the shares based on the vesting schedule from the current shareholder as well as people who have the liquidity need. So that's what happened. So all the buying is being done by the company.
Cool. Thank you so much. Can you give me my hand real quick? I want to open up for everybody. I have more questions, but I want to open up to everybody.
To do that without necessarily bringing in outside new knowledge, but to share.
I think coming back to my previous answer, I think culturally, Vietnam is still a very, very close kind of like culture, so people tend not to share. And that's part of, the reason I'm here is because I'm trying to change that even a little bit for myself, and I'm trying to do that, to encourage inside the company as well. So, and to change things culturally is not an easy thing. Obviously, you encounter that, and I think that many other of us encounter the same thing. What we try to do, I think, specifically, I think the most important thing is that we need to having a very clear objective that everybody would understand that this is a team success, or we're gonna all go home. And I think being able to define that message and to be able to communicate that very clear to each team member, so we see that this is a team success, not just any individual. That number one. Number two, I think it comes down to, again, selection of people, and I think that also, I say that easier said than done. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on one or two really good developers. And that one or two good developers have a tremendous positive impact on the rest of the team, because anybody can learn from that guy, right? Everybody respects that guy. But so we, when I start out, I'm not a developer myself, but I'm trying to find in my network one really good one. Smart developers, and I just recruit him, and then ask him to join as a founding team, and then I still remember the story of he just single-handedly coded the entire payment system in 4 consecutive days without sleeping. And I just sit next to him and say, come on, and we have to hit the deadline. And when he's done, I'm just going and I go and take one prepaid card and test it with one card. And once the test is done, I'm the QA basically. And once it's done, I'm just opening up the payment system. So our original payment system is being tested with one card. But the idea is, if you're doing a startup, it's very important to have a key developers who can build the culture of the rest of the team. If you don't have that guy, or you have like 3 or 4 guys who think they're equally good, then you tend to run into a very big headache of trying to resolve the quarrels or argument between them. So if you're looking at startup even in the US, you would tend to have a very important technology or product guy to be the leader, right? And then anything that you want to teach the team in terms of like sharing, in terms of like cooperation, that 1 or 2 person will be the most important source of culture influence for the rest of the team. But it's difficult to have that.
What kind of upstart company are you most worried about right now? Can you give an example?
Like I said, we tend to respect competitors. We're not really worried about competitors because we really have enough things to worry about. But let me name you one example that we recently encountered. I will not name names, but to give you an example of things that make us worry a lot. So we recently, benchmark ourselves with a competitors, and there's this, this one guy who just being a normal technician. Salary is $4 million a month. And what he did is so amazing that basically he's being asked to do something at 10 o'clock at night. And he just rode his motorbike 50 kilometers to attend to that job and come back at midnight. And there's no incentive payment, incentive kind of like salary scheme for that kind of extra effort of doing it at 10 o'clock. And also he have to pay for the gasoline out of his $4 million salary monthly. There's no gasoline kind of payment from the company. So we ask ourselves, my gosh, that is a really, really strong competitors because they are being able to just be able to teach a very low level person having that kind of work ethic and commitment to the customers. And imagine the whole company. Right? We just had that conversation internally a few days ago. So I think, coming back in Vietnam, there's a lot of smart people. I think that the experience or the skill set, like I say, will over time will be there. But what we respect the most, I'm not using the word worry, but what we respect the most is the people who really work hard and be able to build that spirit to their team. And those people, we believe, are going to go miles and miles, very far, regardless of whether they success in short term or not.
Any other questions?
I want to know a little about your very first time and your very first skill. So as you say, you need to have a leader and also a good developer. I also want to ask, what are the key roles in your team? Your very first team.
I'm not sure whether our history is going to be beneficial to you because every business is very different, right? And then the timing also very different. But I can say when we put together the first team, and obviously I need to find a technical person. I need to find a marketing person. I need to find a salesperson. So that's our original team. And then obviously Brian's team, including also technical and sales and also business development. So it's a bunch of roles. But what happened is, and this is, you really not, like when you think of a role, like, okay, I need a marketing person, I need a salesperson, rarely it will work out exactly what you think. Because, number one, when you start putting the team together, you don't really know your business, right? You only have some ideas about it. And the reality always are very different from the plan or the ideas. Number two, things change. Like what you think may be true, but 3 months later, 6 months later, change. So what happened is maybe the marketing guy 3 months later will have to do something very different. Or the sales guy or the business development guy will have to do something very different as well. So the original role doesn't really matter, right? What matters is you select, you invite people or you choose people based on some of the fundamental skill, fundamentals of that people, like whether they are sharing the same values you have, whether they have shared the same dreams, whether you believe that you can work with those people reasonably well, right? So there's a number of fundamental things. And obviously, if they have skills that you don't have, and that's a good thing, because if, the business requirement, if the business requires certain things, and you have people to fall into that skills. But generally, I think that we don't really have a full map of the future to know exactly, okay, I need a marketing, a technical, a sales, and I'm done. I can just relax and feel happy about it. I mean, that things never happen like that, right?
Another question?
I have a question from online. Why does it was actually the most upvoted question online. So why doesn't VNG invest in Vietnamese startups?
We don't view ourselves as a financial investment company. I think the answer is very, very simple. And I think I want to bring another point of sharing to this answer. Oftentimes, thinking about who we are is a very difficult thing, right? Because simply, when we think, what, we're a business, we can invest, we can do this, we can do real estate, we can do, I take an example, like, if we don't have a deep sense of, of thinking of who we are, then often what we do is going to be the result of external environment, right? We see, oh, this is a good opportunity, let's go do it. Or someone telling us that this is a good thing to do, let's go do it. But if we have a strong sense of who we are or what we really want to achieve, then our actions are guided by that internal compass. And I think that's very, very important. So the reason why we receive so many kind of investment proposals over the years, and we turn most of them down, right? There's a few exceptions, obviously, because we don't view ourselves as a company that making money by investing in others. We view ourselves as a company create product and build a user platform and then build a long-term content entertainment business on that platform. That's who we are. So everything we do, we want it to be aligned with that vision, with that strategy, with the sense of who we really are. And if we don't have that, and we tend with them, and other people can tend to do, a number of things that doesn't really make any sense in the long run, even though in the short run, then it makes a lot of sense. And I think that also applies to individual as well, because having the thinking about who we are is really important in terms of how we're gonna, go a long way, and that's our own experience.
My question is, what is your view about the educational market? I know that VNG starting uni, so I think that your step to the education market, when I want to know more about your view about it.
My short answer is we don't really know. So that a very honestly answer. The reason why we start doing is to understand a little bit more, right? So we don't know, so let's do some experiment to understand it, because there's a lot of the time you can only know if you really do the stuff. I mean, obviously you can afford to do it as well. So we put like a very small team, 3 people on that product. Number one. Number two, we do it for a very specific reason. We're not going to build it as a for-profit product. We want to do it because we believe internet technology is going to have a huge impact on people's life. And so far, that's not really translated on education yet. So that's the fundamental belief in terms of like why we want to do it. And then right now we just kind of experiment. We don't know enough about the industry or the behavior of the user or the product direction yet. So that answers your question of where we are. What we think about it, I think that it's a huge market. Obviously because education is very big everywhere. But also because, you know, I mean, this is, you can, I mean, again, I have to put disclaimer. This is because I read a lot of what other people say, right? So not because I really know. So I just put a disclaimer on that. What happened is education as an industry is not having a lot of innovation over the last 90 to 100 years, right? And then people, especially people who are passionate about technology, trying to figure out a way, okay, you know, how are we going to change the way we learn, how are we going to change the way we, you know, even earn degrees. So we see a lot of like, you know, effort coming out of the US, like Udemy, Coursera, Code Academy, I mean, you name it, there's probably hundreds of startup education, both for-profit and non-profit. And that's starting in the US for the last 3 years. Our own view is that what happened in the US in the past 3 years maybe going to take another 5 to 7 years to happen in Vietnam, right? Because both the resource and the skill set to make an education product to be really successful, and then also how the market how the user behavior going to change to adapt to the new technology and new trend. But doesn't matter. We try to, you know, experiment and learn, and what we hope to achieve is to be able to create something useful in terms of, you know, education, even for a small number of users is okay. Personally, I think it's hard to build a big scale company in terms of education. Many, like, you know, there are many niche markets that I think that a lot of startups trying to do in Vietnam, like education, healthcare, or like, you know, kind of like the traditional kind of like industry. Our view is that it's difficult to do large scale business, but if you will really be able to do something particularly good for a very small group of users, then you can have a successful small business. And that will be the basis for you to continue to survive and pivot and grow. You may be wrong, you don't know anything sometimes. I simply say that I don't know enough. That's what I'm saying. Just say it, just say it.
I have 2 questions for you. Like, the first one is about, I know VNG is very obsessed about mobile stuff. And currently, without VNG is trying to catch the wave of like social platforms, stuff like that. So have you ever thought of other kinds of ideas such as mobile payment and stuff like that? And have you ever given any thought to that? And that's my first question. The second one is that from experience, the working environment at VNG is very Western. Like, it's very different from other companies in Vietnam, such as, okay, I don't want to name them, but from my experience, it's very Western. So my question is that where does that kind of environment come from? I heard that it came from Mr. Brian, and no, I just want to hear your your history of that.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so I think the two questions. Number one is we are there going pay a lot of attention to mobile. So whether we think of any other thing apart from mobile messaging, so like for example mobile payments. And number two is where the culture of westernized environment coming from, right? I think to answer the first question, we try to learn as much as possible about everything mobile. I think learning is a first very important step. Do we think about mobile payment? Obviously, there's many opportunities in mobile, and payment is one of them. I think the challenge for us and for many of the startup in this room, or the would-be startup in this room, is this: when we think about technology and product in Vietnam, we often think about either the generic idea, like the question you mentioned is mobile payment, or we think about how it's really big in other market, like, hey, you know what, Amazon is really big, or like, in our case, Line is really big. But I think the more important question we should ask ourselves is how that technology or that product can work in Vietnam. And that's where all the opportunity will come from, right? Because, I mean, unless some of you having global dream, then, I don't know enough to say about it, but in terms of being a startup or a technology company for Vietnam, then understanding the concept or the trend in other countries is important. But more importantly, you have to understand how it's going to work for Vietnamese users, or how the product or the business is able to evolve or change. And if you're really able to do that, then you open up a lot of opportunities. So when we think about mobile payment, or when we learn, so right now we're trying to use the word learn than just think. While we learn about everything mobile, we often ask ourselves how it's going to work in Vietnam. And that's going to involve a lot of discussion, debate, experiment, talking to other people that maybe they know more than us, and many things, right? So I think that learning process is a very fun and good thing, because you expand your mind and you expand your ability around that learning. I mean, here, obviously, we all know mobile is going to be big, because everybody moving into smartphones right now. But how that particularly going to be changing in Vietnam, and what opportunity it will create, that's not an easy question to answer. And honestly, we attempt to answer that question 2 years ago. We think, okay, with mobile, the first thing that's going to work obviously has to be messaging, right? And that's part of the reason why we invest into that. I think for other part of mobile, payment would be a big thing. Maybe not. I don't know. But we are trying to learn about it right now. For the culture, I think all the technology companies, come on, what we dream to become the Microsoft or the Google or the Facebook of the world. So obviously, all the things we do is to learn from those companies, right? So that's a very obvious question. I mean, even here, the environment here is coming from those kind of like Silicon Valley, US technology company kind of environment. So that's a very easy question to answer. But again, I'm trying to go deeper than just simply answer the question. But having a room is easy. It's not difficult, right? If we have a room, we don't have divider, we don't have crucible, we just have chair and table. But having a mindset is more difficult, because we can work in a room similar to Facebook, but whether we sharing the same values and the same mindset as the westernized startup or culture is a very different thing. And I've already talked about the fact that we tend, as a Vietnamese culture, we tend to focus on negative than the positive. And again, that's an example of having that mindset. You can work in a room similar to all the startups in Silicon Valley work. There's no difference. What difference is what in your mind. whether you can really have that positive mindset, the ability to share, the ability to be able to be really humble and say, I don't know enough, I need to learn more, I need to work hard. And that's what's important about values. We don't think the room, all these benefits, free lunch, all those things is not that important. What more important than that is the mind. And the mind, you have to be able to believe it and practice it yourself, right? So you may have a different route, but it's okay. But as long as you have that mindset, then you can be having the same culture as a Silicon Valley company. I mean, if we just simply, I mean, like obviously create the room is also kind of important because it helps with, creating the right environment. But if you believe that you just build exactly the same and then having the people sitting in that chair and they're going to act just like Western culture, no, that's not going to be like that. So building the culture is also important, but please remember, it starts with the mindset. It's not start with the physical thing.
I have time for one more question.
Sorry, I have two questions. The first one, the first one is flashback from your early day as a small startup. So, what is the thing that you wish you would have not done at that time? That's the first question. And secondly, we all know that video game has been born in the e-commerce in Vietnam. So, what do you see in the e-commerce in Vietnam? Considering that now we have big guy in the town, like Rocket or something.
Okay. What I wish that I would do different in the early days. My God, I go back in time, and now I'm going to be a millionaire because I'm going to know so many things, right? So it's not a it's a hard question to answer. What I wish that I would do different. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to just give you an answer just out of thin air. Normally, I want to really think carefully about the answer, and I don't really think a lot about the past. I mean, that's, so the answer that I don't know. The second question is e-commerce, and I would also say very, very briefly that we also are learning right now. It's a very, very difficult industry to be in. I think that all of the e-commerce business in Vietnam struggle in some way. I mean, each company are different, but we are not all happy, having a very clear vision of how to grow the business and then having people to gather enough resource to grow the business consistently. So I think all the e-commerce players in Vietnam struggle to survive, to learn, and to understand how we can have a clear path to grow and ourselves improve. I think that that would answer the question. Does that answer your question?
Yes, because I just wonder how VNG developed in the e-commerce industry in Vietnam. How the team developed in e-commerce industry in Vietnam. I mean, how
we developed the e-commerce.
And I heard, it was a rumor last month that 123 would close, and then I heard recently that actually it's much better now, and that Lazada is struggling now or something like that. So I don't know, it's all rumors.
So don't believe in all the rumors. Okay, so how we develop? I think it's I'm not sure what the question means, but how we're doing it. So in VNG, what we're trying to do is similar to the question about online education. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a startup mentality and environment in big companies. And obviously that, again, is very easy said and done. There's something that a lot of people trying to figure it out. But what we're trying to do is, if we're looking at opportunity that we don't really understand, then we do two things. One is we're trying to learn, about it. So learning by talking to people, researching, reading, watching people behavior, watching the use of the market data. And second is we're trying to do some experiment. right? Because the best thing to learn is to really do it yourself. So a lot of the things that we do is going to kind of fall into that, category of experiment. So the Zuni project is one thing with 3 people on it. The e-commerce, right? I mean, in the past we experimented with group buy. In 1 year time we decided that experiment should be over. We should not do this because we know enough that we not fail on this stuff. So many of experiments end up in failing. And with e-commerce, I would say right now is a relatively quick experiment for us. So that all thing I can say. So with experiment, then what we're trying to do is we're gonna trying to grow very carefully. We're trying to learn what is the key success factor of that business, and we're trying to learn how the user gonna behave, using the product or using the service. Because before doing all of that, all you can do is making assumptions, right? So that's what we do right now. So the one thing that I can say to you is we learned a lot about e-commerce over the past 1.5 years.
All right, thank you, Evan, so much. Let's give Evan one more big round of applause.
Good luck with good luck with your startup. The one message that I would like we all to carry out of this room today is that really know who you are and what you want to do, and that simple enough. That's really difficult question to answer. And I think that if you be able to answer that 2 questions clearly, doesn't matter whether your startup is going to be successful or not. You're going to have a fun time, a fantastic time, and really enjoy the journey. Whatever you do. So good luck. Thank you.
We have a little announcement from Second Hub, and thank you everyone for watching.